disarmed, diminished, defeated. On a cold winter night near Tikrit, the U.S. forces dragged a strong man out of a hole in the ground.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
And he was in the bottom of a hole, so there's no way he could fight back, so he was just caught like a rat.
The tyrant who once ruled Iraq with an iron grip now appeared as a fugitive, unshaven, exhausted, and stripped of every trace of dignity. For a leader obsessed with immaculate grooming and power, this was the unraveling of his legend. For decades, he imposed a brutal reign over Iraq, from marble palaces and gold-plated halls. His portrait loomed over almost every street, every school, every courtroom of Iraq. Critics saw him wielding power with the confidence of a monarch and the precision of a surgeon, cutting through rivals, silencing dissent, and turning Iraq's sectarian wounds into political weapons. His power stretched beyond Baghdad into the heart of West Asia and further into East. Part statesman, part monarch, part mob boss, part messiah, and beneath it all, the machinery of brutality churned for a quarter of a century. And then in December 2003, not far from the village where he was born, he looked less like the ruler of a Babylonian legend he projected himself as, and more like its ghost.
الحكم على المدان صدام حسين المجيد بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت لارتكاب قتل عمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفق المادة 12 أولاً أليف بدلالة المادة 12 أولاً ثانياً ثالثاً رابعاً من قانون المحكمة.
3 years later, in 2006, that ghost would swing from the gallows, the rope snapping shut on a reign that once seemed untouchable. He was Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq. Saddam was born in 1937 in the village of Al-Auja, outside Tikrit, into the mud house of his uncle. His father, a landless peasant, died before his birth. His mother could not support the child until she took a third husband. Declassified U.S. documents say Saddam committed his first murder at the age of 12. His target? A shepherd from a nearby tribe in Tikrit. By his teens, Saddam was already living by the only code he knew: violence. At 18, the age most step into adulthood, Saddam stepped into Baghdad. Here, the boy from Tikrit encountered the Ba'ath Party, an Arab nationalist movement promising unity in a fractured Iraq. But in a Shia-majority land, the Sunni-led Ba'athists sharpened sectarian divides into instruments of power, and no one would wield them more ruthlessly than Saddam Hussein. In 1959, he joined an assassination attempt against Iraq's prime minister. Some reports suggest the hit was greenlit by the CIA, part of American Cold War games to curb Soviet influence. The mission failed, and in its wake, Saddam found his way to Egypt's capital, Cairo. Hiding in Cairo, Saddam Hussein led an underground Ba'ath Party cell. The city was alive with the then Egyptian president, Gamal Abdel Nasser's fever of Arab unity against Western dominance. And in that climate, Saddam's own vision began to take shape: to return home and seize Iraq for himself. Exiled but unrelenting, his dream of returning to Iraq came true in 1963. When he slipped back into Baghdad, his Ba'athist comrades finished the job he had once failed at, killing Prime Minister al-Qasim and seizing power for themselves. But the first taste of power by Saddam's comrades was brief. They would decisively seize power 5 years later in 1968. Saddam's role in the Ba'athist-led Iraq? The vice president, the new president, one of Saddam's cousins, Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, the Tikrit born to a landless shepherd, was now within touching distance of the summit of power, but not yet at its peak. And for a man like Saddam, second place was never enough. At just 31, Vice President Saddam Hussein knew he had age by his side, so he used this advantage of time to fill the Ba'ath Party ranks with men of his own clan, cementing loyalty in blood and kinship. The 1970s brought Iraq rare stability. The reason? A temporary truce in Iraq's Kurdish people's fight for self-rule. In March 1970, the Iraqi government and the Kurds signed a historic autonomy agreement promising limited self-rule and representation in government within 4 years. And in this 4-year calm, Saddam tightened his grip on the party, on the military, and on the weapon of every dictator, the secret police, effectively turning them into an instrument of fear. In the meantime, Baghdad's fragile truce collapsed into open conflict with the Kurds, a war that bloodied Iraq's north and saw Saddam cement his power within the regime through his use of the secret police, which he unleashed in Baghdad's crackdown on the Kurds. Under Saddam, Iraqi al-Mukhabarat became a labyrinth of security agencies, watching, listening, penetrating every corner of Iraqi society. In homes, in markets, even in mosques, the state was everywhere. For millions of Iraqis, survival meant speaking in silence. By July 1979, with the Mukhabarat backing him, and with a party stacked with loyalists, Saddam Hussein persuaded President al-Bakr to step aside. And in his place rose Saddam Hussein al-Tikriti, the new president of Iraq. A throne he would occupy for a quarter of a century. Barely days into his presidency, Saddam summoned hundreds of Ba'ath Party officials into a grand hall in Baghdad. One by one, names were read aloud. Men who had dined with him, fought beside him, now branded traitors to the new Ba'athist ruler. Some were dragged out as their colleagues watched in terror. Others remained seated, unsure if their name would echo next. It was a theater of fear, choreographed by Saddam himself. By the end, dozens were executed. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty to Saddam was not a matter of choice, but key to survival. By 1979, the purge had left no rival standing. Saddam Hussein ruled alone, unchallenged, unquestioned. But history gave him no pause. Just across the border, Iran's Islamic Revolution toppled the Shah, replacing him with Ayatollah Khomeini. This was a Shia-led revolution, and Saddam, leading a Sunni regime in a Shia-majority Iraq, saw in it a threat of rebellion. So in 1980, he marched Iraq into war with Iran, a gamble to crush Tehran and crown himself defender of the Arab world. What followed was not triumph, but a brutal stalemate. Nearly 8 years of trenches, gas, and graves. 500,000 lives lost on each side, but no clear winner. So in desperation, Saddam turned his weapons inward, on Kurds, on Shias, the communities he deemed pro-Iran. In March 1988, near the Iranian border, Iraqi planes dropped poison gas on a Kurdish town of Halabja. 5,000 civilians died in a single day, their bodies left as silent proof to a massacre that would stain Saddam's name forever. Iran finally agreed to a ceasefire a few months later. Many claim it was the example of chemical weapons used at Halabja, which forced a rethink in Tehran. With Iran held at bay, Saddam looked south, to Kuwait. Rich in oil, small in size, a jewel he believed was Iraq's by right. In August 1990, his tanks rolled across the border. For 2 days, the world stood stunned. Then America and its allies struck back.
This is the will of the entire world, if you will, against this man. and he's got to understand it. So we're going to keep on repeating it. No concession, no negotiation for 1 inch of territory, and Mr. Saddam Hussein, you simply do what the world is calling upon you to do. Get out.
The Gulf War had begun, and it ended in a loss for Saddam Hussein. The defeat brought sanctions, isolation, and the slow suffocation of Iraq. The Iraqi people starved under embargo. While Saddam's palaces grew taller, his paranoia deeper. Then came the 9/11 attacks on the United States. The U.S., under President George W. Bush, vowed to hunt down terrorists and those who sheltered them. Saddam's Iraq was soon in the crosshairs. The Bush administration accused Baghdad of developing weapons of mass destruction, claims that became the central justification for an invasion.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict.
No such weapons were ever found. But nonetheless, America invaded Iraq in 2003, and Baghdad fell. Saddam's statues were toppled. His regime was unraveled. His sons, Uday and Qusay, were hunted down first, killed by U.S. troops in a raid on Mosul. But the manhunt still hadn't caught Saddam himself. For months, he vanished, a phantom haunting the ruins of his state, until December 2003. Acting on tips from his own bodyguard and disgruntled relatives, U.S. troops finally closed in. Saddam was found near his boyhood home in Tikrit. Hiding in a so-called spider hole, a cramped underground chamber 6 feet deep, barely enough to lie down with a crude air vent and fan, camouflaged with bricks, dirt, and a carpet, it lay within view of some of his palaces. Soldiers were seconds from tossing in a grenade when Saddam emerged and surrendered. The capture was heralded as a turning point. The West hoped that Iraq's spiraling violence would now subside. After a trial many still denounce as victor's justice, on December 30, 2006, Saddam Hussein was hanged for crimes against humanity. His last words? Defiant, but his fall, absolute.
The regime of Saddam Hussein was a clear threat. The world is safer because Saddam Hussein is no longer in power.
But the story did not end at the gallows. Iraq was left fractured. Where Saddam once ruled through fear, chaos, and militias rushed in, American promises of democracy collided with insurgency and civil war. Sectarian flames burned cities and shattered families. And in that fire, a new terror rose, the Black Flags of ISIS. Though eventually defeated, they left Iraq further broken, with instability deepening into its soil. The reign of the Butcher of Baghdad is long over, but Saddam's shadow, the architecture of fear, division, and violence, still lingers over the nation that he once ruthlessly ruled.